Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Emma Gillespie.
I'm Emily Donohoe.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is at the centre of the latest Epstein controversy after a scandal involving his former ambassador to the US and the late sex offender. Senior political figures have called on Starmer to quit, but the British PM says he will never walk away from the job. Today, we are going to unpack what's happened, who's involved, and why Starmer's leadership is in doubt.
Another week, another Epstein revelation.
Feels that way, Em?
Yes, but this story is a pretty big deal in UK politics right now. Before we get into what's happened, can you bring us up to speed with some background about the Epstein files?
Absolutely. So Jeffrey Epstein, of course, was an American hedge fund manager and convicted sex offender. He served 13 months in prison for child sex trafficking in 2008. He served that time, then he was released, and then eventually arrested again on new sex trafficking charges in 2019. At that point, he was denied bail, and a short time later, he died by suicide in his jail cell while awaiting trial. Now, Epstein was friends with a raft of influential figures, high-profile politicians, celebrities, wealthy individuals, many whose relationships with him have been in the spotlight in recent years, and some who've been accused of engaging in sexual crimes with Epstein. Several of them are named in these millions of documents that we now know as the Epstein files.
Yeah, and a new tranche of files has dropped recently, which is why there have been so many Epstein headlines lately.
Exactly. Epstein headlines persist, but that's why at the moment it's particularly saturated. So late last month, the US Department of Justice released millions of files relating to Epstein, and these are documents that include emails, letters, photos, other communications, all between Epstein and various people in his network.
Yeah, and these latest files include some damaging revelations about a British politician called Peter Mandelson. Who is he and what is his connection to all of this?
Yeah, Peter Mandelson has been a senior figure in the UK Labour Party for several decades, so stretching right back to the early 2000s when he served in cabinet positions. And until pretty recently, he was actually the UK's ambassador to the US, a role that he was appointed to in February 2025. But Mandelson has also been tied to Epstein, which is not exactly new information. We first heard about this between 2019 and 2024. So there were several media reports during that time linking Mandelson to Epstein, and that included images of them together and email exchanges.
Right. So Mandelson became ambassador in February last year, which means the alleged links to Epstein, as you said, 2019, 2024, were already public knowledge. And Starmer appointed him when those were already public knowledge.
Yep.
But that was a year ago. So when did things escalate?
So this story really intensified in September last year, and that's when more correspondence between Mandelson and Epstein became public. So firstly, a US congressional committee released what's been called a birthday book. You might have heard about it last year. It was basically this kind of big scrapbook put together by Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, she is the former girlfriend of Epstein and a convicted sex offender herself. But basically, it was this collection of birthday wishes that Maxwell had gathered from Epstein's network, including people like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, all for Epstein's 50th birthday in 2003. Now, the book also contained a 10-page message from Mandelson to his quote-unquote best pal, Epstein, as well.
Okay, so one of the reasons this piece of information is so interesting is that it gives us more of an understanding of Epstein and Mandelson's relationship. A 10-page birthday message to your best pal indicates quite a close friendship, you'd have to think.
Well, exactly. We've also seen leaked emails between Mandelson and Epstein from before, during, and after Epstein's prison sentence for sex trafficking in June 2008 when he was behind bars for 13 months. So, for example, after learning of Epstein's sentence, Mandelson wrote to him saying, quote, "I think the world of you and I feel hopeless and furious about what has happened." Following the publication of these emails in September last year, the UK government removed Mandelson from the ambassador position, so he was no longer ambassador to the US from that point. And the government at the time said the emails showed, quote, "the depth and extent of Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment." Mandelson told The Sun at the time he, quote, "never saw the wrongdoing by Epstein, perhaps because I am a gay man."
That's an interesting defense. So that was in September last year. What happened next?
Well, at the end of January, as we know, the US Department of Justice released millions more documents relating to the Epstein files, and that included more emails between Mandelson and Epstein. Among them is an exchange on the day Epstein was released from prison in July 2009, which I wanted to quickly read out. So Epstein emails Mandelson saying, "Free and home." Mandelson, who was the UK Secretary of State for Business and Trade at the time, he replies saying, "How shall we celebrate?" Epstein then writes, quote, "With grace and modesty, those are the names of two strippers." Mandelson writes back, "From now on, grace and modesty should be discovered in London. How is freedom feeling?" "She feels fresh, firm and creamy," Epstein says. Mandelson responds with, "Naughty boy."
Delightful.
So, yeah, and that kind of tone, I think, as crass as it is important to note. It appears across several other emails between the pair. They exchange sexual references, suggestive jokes across a few different other email chains. But separately to that, the pair also discussed the inner workings of UK Parliament. As I mentioned, Mandelson was a senior minister at the time, and Epstein gave Mandelson advice about how to approach certain political issues. It's also believed that the pair spoke regularly over the phone. There are plenty of emails from each of them that say, "Call me." So we know what they've said to each other via email, but we'll never really know what they said over the phone. But they certainly were in regular communication across several different mediums.
Sounds like it. And some of the emails suggest that Mandelson had leaked discussions on possible UK asset sales and tax changes to Epstein during the 2009 financial crash, which a lot of listeners would probably remember. This is a really serious allegation because it suggests Mandelson was sharing confidential government information at the time.
Hey guys, this is my friend Rosa. Say hi, Rosa.
Hi, Rosa.
She's cooking up the deep dive video that you're watching right now. Rosa, what do you want them to do?
Subscribe.
You heard the woman. Now back to the video.
Yeah, you're right. And officials in the UK are treating it as such, as a serious matter, because a few days after the latest Epstein file drop, London's Metropolitan Police, also known as the Met, launched an investigation into Mandelson, sparked by the DOJ release. The Met said it received reports into alleged misconduct in public office, including from the UK government itself. And now ultimately that has sparked this criminal investigation into whether or not Mandelson acted unlawfully as a minister at the time.
Has Mandelson responded to any of those allegations?
So the day after the Met launched this investigation, Mandelson actually stepped down from the House of Lords. So he was no longer ambassador, but he still held that position. And his spokesperson told the BBC this week that he, quote, did not discover the truth about Epstein until after his death, and that Mandelson is profoundly sorry that powerless and vulnerable women and girls were not given the protection they deserved. Mandelson hasn't actually commented directly or publicly himself. He hasn't addressed the allegations about the leaked documents, but that is what we have heard for now from his team.
Right, okay. So these new revelations have led to criticism then of the current UK Prime Minister. So where does Keir Starmer fit into all of this, and what's been happening over the past week or so?
Yeah, so last week Starmer issued an apology to Epstein's victims, and that followed the latest release of files. There are these big questions now over how much Starmer knew, or if Starmer knew something and chose to ignore it when deciding to appoint Mandelson to the ambassador position. Starmer said that Mandelson, quote, portrayed Epstein as someone he barely knew, and when that became clear that it was not true, I sacked him. So Starmer says that Mandelson distanced himself from Epstein, but that these files show that the relationship was closer. But the fallout for Starmer has been huge. Those comments didn't really cut it with his government. On Sunday, his chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, resigned from his position, taking, quote, full responsibility for Mandelson's appointment.
Wow.
The next day, Starmer's head of communications, a guy called Tim Allen, also stepped down. And The Guardian reported that he had decided to stand down to, quote, allow a new number 10 team to be built, referring to the PM's office in London at 10 Downing Street.
Yeah, right. So they had 2 senior resignations in 2 days, but multiple MPs, including from Starmer's own Labour Party, have also called on him to resign. And what have those politicians said?
It's all a similar rhetoric, and what we heard from Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar kind of sums it up. He said, quote, "We cannot allow the failures at the heart of Downing Street to mean the failures continue here in Scotland." There is an election coming up there, so that is some important context. In terms of opposition politicians who have weighed in, we heard from leader of the Conservative Party Reform UK, Nigel Farage. He said he believes Starmer will resign before very long.
Interesting. And how has Starmer responded to all of this?
Well, he's come out fighting. Starmer has given a really defiant speech. Here's a little bit of what he said yesterday.
"I will never walk away from the mandate I was given to change this country. I will never walk away from the people that I am charged with fighting for. And I will never walk away from the country that I love."
He goes on to kind of say that the real danger confronting the UK right now is not this infighting within his own party, within the Labour Party, but that there is this right-wing opposition that he describes as having this politics of divide and grievance that he said will tear our country apart.
So Starmer has tried to shift the focus away from his own party, and the tensions have appeared to have eased. Is that right?
Yeah, for now, things seem to have eased somewhat. Starmer's top senior ministers have said that they are backing him as leader. Importantly, there were some potential leadership rivals. Whenever we hear rumours about a leadership challenge, then the conversation turns to, well, who would replace him? One of those rivals was former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, and she has backed Starmer's leadership. Another possible contender for the leadership was Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. He's now also said he supports Starmer. And Energy Secretary Ed Miliband said that Labor MPs, quote, had looked over the precipice and they didn't like what they saw and they thought the right thing was to unite behind Keir.
Right. And before we wrap up, I think it's also important to mention that this scandal has once again touched the royal family. So what is the latest there?
Yeah. Separately, police have also announced an investigation into the former Prince Andrew for allegedly sharing confidential material with Epstein. Of course, many unanswered questions about Andrew's relationship with Epstein. Buckingham Palace has responded, though. They released a statement on Monday confirming the palace will support a police investigation if needed. A spokesperson for Prince William and Princess Kate also weighed in, telling media that the pair were, quote, deeply concerned by the continuing revelations.
Wow.
The rhetoric from the royal family in recent weeks has really centered around victims and supporting victims and survivors of sexual abuse. So that's the kind of language that they've been using. But the Epstein files clearly continue to raise so many questions about who knew what and when, not just in the US, but clearly around the world, as we're seeing.
Yeah, and there's plenty going on in the UK right now, but what will the next steps be for Keir Starmer?
The key question now is going to be whether or not he did proper due diligence before appointing Mandelson to that ambassador role. Given that some of the connections to Epstein were already out in the public, what kind of processes were undertaken by Starmer and the broader government to decide that Mandelson was the right person for the job. So there'll continue to be questions about his leadership, I think we can expect, as he navigates those next steps. Starmer has said that he's committed to transparency, that he'll release documents about the appointment process to Parliament as soon as possible. So he's trying to be on the right side of this. But for now, he has managed to hold on to his position. He has the support of his party, but this is far from over, especially with the ongoing investigation into Mandelson with the Met Police. We will wait and see him.
Well, thank you so much for breaking that down for us, Emma, and thank you for listening to us at the Daily Aus. We'll be back with the latest headlines later this afternoon, but until then, have a good one.